I was the family bank until I found the will that gave my sister everything. They had no idea I'd stopped paying their bills, so when my mom texted Powers about to get shut off, I had my ultimate revenge. I'm Ethan, 34, male, and my world shattered the day I discovered my name was completely absent from my parents' will, with every last thing designated for my sister, Ava. For years, I had been the dutiful son, the financial bedrock of the family, the one they called when things went wrong. In their eyes, however, it seemed my only real value was my bank account. The realization was a cold, hard slap in the face, a confirmation of a lifetime of subtle and not-so-subtle signs that I was the support beam, while my sister was the treasured centerpiece they spent all their time decorating. So I made a quiet decision. I stopped being their utility, and the silence that followed was more peaceful than I could have ever imagined. Right up until the day my phone buzzed with a message from my mother, a message that held no warmth, no greeting, just a stark, entitled demand that proved I had made the right choice. My wife, Chloe, and I have been married for 7 wonderful years. She is my partner in every sense of the word, a brilliant and compassionate woman who saw the toxic dynamic in my family from our first Christmas together. She never pushed, but she always supported. Her quiet presence, a constant reminder of what unconditional love actually felt like. My parents, Sharon and Robert, were, on the surface, a normal suburban couple. My father had worked in logistics, until taking an early retirement 5 years ago, citing burnout and a series of vague health issues. My mother worked part-time at a local library, a job that seemed to be more of a social hobby than a financial necessity. Then there was Ava. My younger sister, Ava, is 29 years old and lives in a state of perpetual self-discovery. She floats through life on a cloud of parental approval, moving from one passion to the next, pottery, then screenwriting, then a brief but expensive foray into becoming a life coach, and most recently, an aspiring influencer and part-time yoga instructor. Her apartment, her car, her very lifestyle were all carefully subsidized by my parents, which, as I would later understand in painful clarity, meant they were subsidized by me. The favoritism wasn't a secret. It was just a feature of our family's landscape, a mountain you learn to navigate around. The examples are so numerous they blur together, but a few stand out in high definition. The first, and perhaps most formative, was the saga of our first cars. When I turned 17, the expectation was clear. If I wanted a car, I had to earn it. I spent the entire summer before my senior year working at a greasy spoon diner, flipping burgers and mopping floors. I saved every penny, and by the end of August, I had just enough to buy a 10-year-old sedan that rattled when it went over 50 miles per hour. I was immensely proud of that car. My parents patted me on the back and said, "See, Ethan, the value of hard work." 3 years later, Ava turned 17. There was no talk of summer jobs or hard work. On the morning of her birthday, a brand-new cherry-red convertible sat in the driveway with a giant bow on it. Her shrieks of joy echoed through the neighborhood. My father filmed the whole thing, a proud smile on his face. When I later asked my mother how they could afford it, she gave me a tired look. "Oh, Ethan, don't be like that," she'd said. "Ava is just so full of life. She needed something reliable, something safe. We couldn't have her driving around in some old clunker." The implication hung in the air. My safety had been negotiable. The second monument to their favoritism was college. I had good grades and got into a decent university to study accounting, a practical choice because I knew I was on my own. My parents sat me down and gave me the "we're so proud, but we're strapped" speech. They couldn't contribute to my tuition. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. I took out student loans, worked 2 jobs through all 4 years of my degree, and graduated with a mountain of debt that took me the better part of a decade to pay off. It was a grind, But I did it. When it was Ava's turn, the financial landscape had miraculously changed. She had no interest in a traditional degree. Instead, she wanted to embark on a journey of personal growth. This journey involved a series of eye-wateringly expensive workshops on the West Coast, a month-long retreat in Bali to find her center, and a certification course in a type of yoga that only seemed to be practiced in luxury resorts. To fund this, my parents took out a second mortgage on their house, the very house they told me they had no equity in when I needed help with a tuition bill. It's an investment in her happiness, Ethan, my father had explained, as if my happiness was something that didn't require capital. The final straw before the ultimate betrayal of the will came when Chloe and I were trying to buy our first home. We had saved diligently, but the down payment was a huge hurdle. We tentatively asked my parents if they could possibly lend us a small amount, which we would pay back with interest. The answer was a regretful but firm no. The purse strings were tight, they said. They had their own retirement to think about. We understood, and we buckled down, saving for another year until we finally scraped enough together on our own. Less than a year after we moved into our modest starter home, Ava decided she needed to live downtown to be closer to the creative scene for her burgeoning influencer career. My parents didn't just help her. They paid her security deposit and the first 6 months' rent on a chic, trendy loft apartment that cost more per month than our mortgage. When I saw the photos she posted online of her posing with a glass of champagne, a skyline view behind her, thanking her amazing parents for always believing in my dreams, I felt a familiar, dull ache. It was the ache of being the reliable, invisible son, the one who worked hard so that others could dream. I just didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. The real testament to my invisibility was still waiting to be discovered, tucked away in a manila folder in my father's filing cabinet. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other, which made the memory of it feel all the more surreal, like a scene from a movie spliced into the mundane footage of my own life. My dad, Robert, had called me in a minor panic. He needed to find a specific policy document for their home insurance to contest a claim they'd been denied. His office was a testament to his organized chaos theory of life, which meant it was an absolute disaster zone of stacked papers, old magazines, and miscellaneous files. He was getting flustered, and as always, when a practical problem arose, he called me. "Ethan, I just can't find it," he'd said, his voice tinny over the phone. "Your mother is convinced I threw it out, but I know it's in the filing cabinet somewhere. Could you come over after work and give me a hand? Your eyes are better than mine." "Of course, Dad," I'd replied automatically. This was my role. Ethan, the problem solver. Ethan, the reliable one. Chloe gave me a knowing look as I hung up. "Let me guess, another crisis at Command Central." "You know it," I sighed, grabbing my keys. "Shouldn't take long. He just needs me to find an insurance paper." When I arrived, the scene was just as I'd pictured. My father was standing helplessly in the middle of his office, hands on his hips, staring at a 4-drawer filing cabinet, as if it were an unassailable fortress. "It's in the H section for home insurance, or maybe the I section for insurance. Or it could be under S for State Farm," he mumbled, more to himself than to me. I smiled faintly and got to work, starting with the top drawer. I sifted through old tax returns, car maintenance receipts from a vehicle they hadn't owned in a decade, and user manuals for appliances that had long since been replaced. It was a paper graveyard. About 20 minutes in, while rummaging through the bottom drawer, which seemed to contain their most important documents, my fingers brushed against a thick, crisp manila folder. It was labeled in my mother's neat, careful handwriting, "Last Will and Testament, Sharon and Robert." A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a deep, cold premonition, a sense that I was about to look behind a curtain I couldn't unsee. I had never considered their will before. I just assumed it would be a simple, straightforward affair, split everything down the middle between their two children. That's what normal parents did, wasn't it? My father had wandered out of the room to get a glass of water, and I was alone. My heart started to pound. I knew I shouldn't look. It was a violation of their privacy, a boundary I shouldn't cross. But a stronger, more desperate instinct took over, an instinct born from years of feeling like I was on the outside looking in. I needed to know. I needed to see, in black and white, if my place in the family was what I hoped it was, or what I feared it was. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled the folder out and opened it on the desk. It was a formal, lawyer-prepared document, full of dense legal language. I scanned past the initial pages, looking for the section on beneficiaries. The part that would name the heirs to their estate, the house, their savings, everything they had spent a lifetime building, and then I found it. Article 3. Disposition of property. My eyes scanned the text, and the air left my lungs in a sudden, painful rush. It felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me. I read the paragraph. Once, then twice, then a third time, convinced my eyes were deceiving me. But the words remained the same, stark and unambiguous. We give, devise, and bequeath all of our property, both real and personal, of whatever kind and wherever situated, to our beloved daughter Ava, the text read. It went on to name her as the sole beneficiary. It even specified that if Ava were to predecease them, everything would pass to a trust for her future children. My name, Ethan, was nowhere. I wasn't just given a smaller share. I wasn't an afterthought. I was completely, utterly, and deliberately omitted. It was as if I didn't exist. As a final, brutal confirmation, the next section named the executor of the will, the person responsible for carrying out their final wishes. It was Ava. A ringing started in my ears. The room felt hot and close. This document wasn't just about money or a house. It was a definitive statement of my worth to them. It was a summary of my entire life with them. I was the support structure. But I was not part of the building they intended to leave behind. Even my wife Chloe, the woman who had been a devoted daughter-in-law to them for 7 years, was not mentioned. Not even a token of sentiment. It was all for Ava. Always. I carefully placed the folder back into the filing cabinet, exactly where I had found it. My movements felt robotic, detached. I found the insurance document a minute later, ironically filed under C for claims. I walked out to the kitchen and handed it to my father. "Here it is, Dad." My voice sounded strange and distant to my own ears. "Ah, fantastic." "I knew you'd find it," he said, beaming, completely oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred within me. "You're a lifesaver, son." Son. The word felt like a lie. I made a quick excuse about Chloe needing me home and left before they could draw me into more conversation. The drive home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I didn't say a word when I walked through the door. Chloe took one look at my face, and her expression changed from welcome to concern. "Ethan, what is it?" "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." We sat on the couch, and the story spilled out of me, a torrent of pain and disbelief. I told her everything. When I finished, I was breathing heavily, the full weight of the betrayal crushing down on me. I waited for her to say something, anything. She was silent for a long moment, her face a mask of cold fury. Then she wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a fierce, protective embrace. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered into my hair. "They're not just bad parents. They're cruel. What they've done, it's monstrous." Her anger on my behalf was the only thing that kept me from completely shattering. She didn't question me. She didn't try to find another explanation. She saw the truth for what it was. In her arms, I finally let go, and the quiet grief I had been suppressing for years, turned into silent, racking sobs. I was mourning a relationship I had desperately wanted to believe in, but the evidence was now undeniable. To my parents, I wasn't a son. I was an investment with no expected return. In the days following the discovery, a heavy silence settled over our home. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but a contemplative one. I moved through my life in a fog of hurt, the words from the will echoing in my mind on a loop. Every memory of my childhood and young adulthood was now cast in a new, harsh light. Every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd put their needs before my own, now felt less like an act of love and more like a foolish transaction in which I was the only one paying. The financial arrangement had started innocently enough. About 5 years ago, shortly after my father's early retirement, he and my mother had sat me down at their dining room table, a somber look on their faces. They laid out their financial situation, explaining that with Dad's reduced pension and Mom's minimal income, they were going to have trouble making ends meet. They painted a picture of a future filled with struggle and anxiety. "We just don't know what we're going to do, Ethan," my mother had said, her voice trembling slightly. "The mortgage payment alone is a mountain." My father had looked at me with weary eyes. "You're the man of the family now, son. You've done so well for yourself. We were hoping we wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency." As a senior accountant, I was financially stable. Chloe and I were careful with our money, but we were comfortable. Listening to their story, I felt a surge of filial duty. These were my parents. I couldn't let them lose their home. Ava, of course, was never mentioned as a potential contributor. She was still finding her footing, a delicate artist who couldn't be burdened with such crass, worldly concerns as mortgage payments. The responsibility, as always, fell to me, so I agreed. I told them not to worry. I went home and, with a heavy but resolute heart, set up a series of automatic monthly payments from my bank account to theirs: the mortgage, the power bill, the water, the internet, and cable package, the car insurance. It was a substantial sum, an amount that quietly delayed our own financial goals. But I told myself it was the right thing to do. It was what a good son does. For 5 years, that money had flowed from my account to theirs, uninterrupted. I never mentioned it, and they rarely acknowledged it. Other than the occasional, "Oh, we couldn't do it without you, Ethan," it was just the new normal now. With the knowledge of the will burning in my mind, that new normal felt like a grand deception. I wasn't supporting my parents. I was funding their ability to endlessly support my sister. I was the engine in the car, hidden under the hood, while Ava was the shiny hood ornament they proudly displayed. The will was the final, irrefutable proof. They had no intention of ever repaying my loyalty or my investment. I was a resource to be used up. A week after the discovery, Chloe and I were sitting on our back porch. The sun was setting, and she was watching me as I stared blankly at the garden. I hadn't really talked about it since that first night. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. "I'm thinking about that automatic payment," I said, my voice low. "It's scheduled to go out in 3 days." She reached across the small table and placed her hand on mine. "You know you don't have to keep doing it, right? You don't owe them that. You don't owe them anything." Her words were like a key turning in a lock. The guilt and sense of obligation that had been programmed into me since childhood began to recede, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. She was right. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in their hearts that was never available to me. I was done. The competition was over because it had been rigged from the start. That evening, I went into our home office and opened my laptop. Chloe sat in the chair beside me, her presence a silent show of support. I logged into my online banking portal. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't pound with anger. I felt a profound and surprising sense of calm. I navigated to the bill pay section. There they were, all lined up: Sharon and Robert Mortgage, City Utilities, Aquawater, Xfinity, State Farm. A list of my quiet, thankless responsibilities. One by one, I clicked on them. A small window would pop up. Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment? Every click of the confirm button, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. It was a methodical, deliberate dismantling of the financial structure that had propped up their lives and held me down. Click the mortgage, the biggest one, the payment that ensured they had a roof over their heads while they planned to give that very roof to my sister. Cancelled. Click the power, the lights and heating they took for granted. Cancelled. Click the water. Cancelled. Click the internet that allowed my mother to browse recipes and my sister to stream her shows when she visited. Cancelled. When I was finished, the list was empty. The flow of money had stopped. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't confronted them. I hadn't written a bitter email. I had just ... stopped. The silence of my action felt more powerful than any angry words could ever be. I closed the laptop. It's done, I said to Chloe. She squeezed my hand. How do you feel? I thought for a moment. Free, I said, and I was surprised by how true it was. I feel free. I wasn't just taking back my money. I was taking back my life. I had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own future, not just a silent funder of someone else's. The game had changed, and my parents just didn't know it yet. The first week after I canceled the payments was the hardest. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach would clench. I expected a call, a text, an angry email. I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation, for the accusations and the guilt-tripping. But there was nothing. Just silence. The mortgage payment would have been debited from my account on the 5th of the month. The utility bills were due at various points mid-month. As each day passed without a word from them, a strange realization dawned on me. They didn't even notice. They were so accustomed to my silent, dependable support that they didn't even check to see if the money had arrived. They just assumed it had, as it always did. The thought was both insulting and liberating. It confirmed that I was not a person to them, but a function, an automated process that ran in the background of their lives. With the anxiety slowly fading, a new feeling began to take its place. Peace. Our home felt lighter. The constant low-level resentment I had been carrying for years began to dissipate. Chloe noticed it immediately. You're smiling more, she said one evening as we were cooking dinner together. Genuinely smiling. She was right. The financial weight was gone, but it was more than that. The emotional burden of trying to be seen by people who refused to see me was lifting. Instead of funneling a significant portion of my income into a black hole of ingratitude, Chloe and I started investing in our own lives. That first weekend, I took her to a fancy restaurant we had talked about for years, but had always deemed too extravagant. We ordered the best things on the menu and didn't look at the prices. It felt decadent, but also deeply right. We were celebrating our freedom. The following week, we made a large extra payment on our own mortgage, and watching the principal balance drop was more satisfying than any strained thank you I had ever received from my parents. We booked a long weekend trip to a coastal town, something we had been putting off for a better time. The better time, we realized, was now. Life became about us. We spent Saturdays working in our garden, planting vegetables and flowers. We reconnected with friends we hadn't seen in ages. We were building our own world, a world based on mutual respect and shared joy. And it was beautiful. Curiosity, however, is a powerful thing. One evening, I found myself typing Ava's name into a social media search bar. Her profile was public, a carefully curated gallery of her perfect, effortless life. It was a painful scroll. There she was, just last week, posing with a new designer handbag. Treat yourself. The caption read. A few days before that, she was at a fancy brunch with friends, a mimosa held aloft. Hashtag living my best life thanks to the most supportive family ever. I felt a surge of cold anger. Her best life was one I had been unknowingly bankrolling. The money that could have been our vacation fund or our retirement savings had been transformed into her brunches and handbags, all while my parents planned to reward her for it with their entire estate. The injustice of it was staggering. It hardened my resolve and wiped away any lingering traces of guilt. They had made their choice about who was important, and I was simply honoring their decision. The month crept by. The 20th came and went. That was usually when the power company sent out its late notices. I pictured a small, pink envelope arriving at their house. I wondered if they would even open it. Would they assume it was a mistake? Would they call the power company, confused? Or would they, finally, realize that the river of money had run dry? The silence from their end was profound. It was as if a door had been closed and I was finally on the other side. I stopped checking my phone with a sense of dread. I stopped bracing for impact. I began to accept the quiet. For 30 days, I was not their son, not their financial safety net, not their problem solver. I was just Ethan, a man living his life with his wife, and it was enough. I didn't know it then, but it was the calm before the storm. The foundations of their comfortable world, which I had been supporting for so long, were about to crumble. And when they did, they wouldn't reach out with questions or concern. They would reach out with a demand. The silence was about to be broken, not with a bang, but with a single entitled text message that would prove, beyond all doubt, that I had done the right thing. The text arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I was at my desk at work, trying to finalize a quarterly report before the end-of-day deadline. The office was quiet. The only sounds, the soft clicking of keyboards and the hum of the air conditioner. My phone, which was lying face down on the desk, vibrated with a soft buzz. I glanced at it, expecting a message from Chloe or a notification from a news app. But it was my mother's name, Sharon, on the screen. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. After a month of absolute silence, this was it. I took a slow breath, my carefully constructed peace suddenly feeling fragile. I steeled myself for what was to come, the angry questions, the feigned hurt, the accusations of being a terrible son. I slid my thumb across the screen and opened the message. It was worse than I could have ever imagined, precisely because it was so much less. There were no questions. There was no anger. There was no emotion at all. The message contained only 7 words. Power's about to get shut off. That was it. No, hello, Ethan. No, I hope you're doing well. No, we haven't heard from you. Is everything okay? No explanation of why she was telling me this. No query as to why the bill might be unpaid. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the blunt, impersonal expectation of a customer complaining to a service provider. It was a command, disguised as a notification. Your service has been interrupted. Fix it. I stared at the stark white bubble on my screen, and something inside me snapped. The last vestiges of nostalgic affection, of filial duty, of lingering grief for the family I wished I had had all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a wave of pure, cold rage. The sheer, unmitigated entitlement of it was breathtaking. After a lifetime of being treated as secondary, after discovering their ultimate betrayal in the will, after a month of them not even noticing my absence from their lives, my only purpose was still to be their financial fix-it man. They hadn't missed me. They had missed my money. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my mind racing. I composed and deleted a dozen replies. I wrote long, furious paragraphs detailing every slight, every injustice, From the convertible to the college tuition to the will itself. I wrote scathing, sarcastic replies about how they might want to check with their sole heiress. But I deleted them all. They didn't deserve an explanation. They didn't deserve the satisfaction of a lengthy, emotional response. I didn't deserve any more of my energy. An explanation would imply that our relationship was something worth fighting for. And their text message had just proven that it wasn't. I took a shaky breath and sent a quick screenshot of the text to Chloe. Her reply came back almost instantly. Unbelievable. Don't let her pull you back in, Ethan. You know what you have to do? Be strong. She was right. My anger subsided, replaced by a steely, resolute calm. My parents had reduced our entire relationship down to a single transactional function. So my reply would be equally simple. It would be an answer, a solution, and a final definitive statement all in one. I went back to the message thread with, "My mother." My thumbs felt steady now. I typed out 2 short words. 2 words that shifted the burden from my shoulders to where it rightfully belonged. Ask Ava. I hit send. The blue message bubble popped up on the screen. I didn't wait for the delivered receipt to change to read. I didn't want to see the 3 little dots of her typing a furious response. I didn't want to receive the inevitable angry phone call. I was done. This was the end of the conversation, not the beginning of a new one. With a final, decisive movement, I tapped on her contact name. I scrolled down past send message and share my location. I found the option I was looking for, written in red. Block this caller. A confirmation window popped up. You will not receive phone calls, messages, or FaceTime from people on the block list. I pressed block contact. Then I did the same for my father's number. And finally, for Ava's. One by one, I bricked up the pathways they had used to access my life, my time, and my wallet. It was a digital wall, but it felt as real and solid as stone. I put my phone back down on the desk, face down. A profound sense of finality washed over me. It was over. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't screamed, I hadn't lost my temper. I had simply given them the answer to their problem. The power was about to get shut off. Ask Ava. The mortgage was late. Ask Ava. The car insurance was canceled. Ask Ava. She was their future. She could be their present too. I turned back to my quarterly report, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a newfound lightness. The work on the screen was clear, logical, and straightforward. For the first time, my life felt that way. 2. The silence that followed my one-word reply and subsequent blocking was of a different quality than the month that had preceded it. The first silence had been filled with my own anxious anticipation. This new silence was absolute, a void, of my own making. For several days, it was blissful. I no longer flinched when my phone rang. I felt secure behind the digital walls I had erected. Chloe and I enjoyed the quiet, feeling as though we had finally detached a heavy, rattling anchor from our ship. But I knew it wouldn't last. My parents, and by extension Ava, were not the type to simply accept a closed door. If they couldn't get through it, they would find someone else to knock on it for them. The call came a week later. It was from my mother's sister, my Aunt Carol. I had always liked her well enough, though our relationship was more of a Christmas and birthdays affair. I saw her name on the caller ID and felt a sense of weary resignation. I answered the phone. "Ethan, it's Carol." Her voice was tight with a forced, dramatic concern. "I just got off the phone with your mother. She's absolutely beside herself. So is your father." "Is that so?" I replied, keeping my own voice level and calm. "Yes, Ethan. What on earth is going on?" "Your mother said their power was shut off. They had to borrow money from a neighbor just to get it turned back on. She said you won't answer her calls. She's worried sick. Worried sick. The phrase was so outrageously false, it was almost funny. She wasn't worried about my well-being. She was worried her personal ATM had been shut down. "Aunt Carol," I said, my voice patient, as if explaining something to a child. "I'm not going to get into a long back and forth about this. I will tell you, and you can tell anyone else who asks, the simple facts. Are you listening?" There was a hesitant pause on the other end. "Yes. ... For the last 5 years, I have been paying my parents' major bills. Their mortgage, their utilities, their insurance. I did this because they told me they were struggling and I wanted to help." I took a breath. "Recently, I discovered that my parents have already written their will. In it, they leave 100% of their estates, the house I was helping pay for, their savings, everything to Ava. My name is not mentioned. They made a very clear statement about who they consider to be their family and their future. So, I have decided to honor their wishes and step back, allowing their chosen heir to take on the responsibilities of the family." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear my aunt processing the information, trying to reconcile the story of the poor, abandoned parents she had just heard from my mother with the cold, logical facts I had just presented. "They ... they wrote you out of the will." She finally stammered, her tone shifting from accusation to shock. "Completely," I confirmed. "So you see, this isn't about me being cruel or disappearing. It's about me accepting the reality of the situation. My financial support has ended. From now on, they should direct all of their requests to Ava." I had no idea, Ethan," she said, her voice much softer now. "Sharon didn't mention any of that." "I'm sure she didn't," I said dryly. "It doesn't paint a very flattering picture. Anyway, I have to go. It was good talking to you." I hung up before she could ask any more questions. I had said my piece. The truth was out there now, at least in one other corner of the family. I knew my mother would spin her own narrative, casting herself as the victim, but I didn't care. The people who mattered, namely Chloe, knew the truth. A few weeks later, we heard through the family grapevine that Ava had moved back in with our parents. The trendy downtown loft apartment was apparently too expensive to maintain without the silent subsidy I had been providing them. I could only imagine the tense, claustrophobic atmosphere in that house. Now 3 people, trapped in a situation of their own making, forced to confront the real-world consequences of their choices. There were no more calls. The lines of communication remained closed. My life, once so entangled with their manufactured crises and emotional manipulations, was now my own. The peace it brought was immeasurable. Chloe and I thrived in it. We were a team, unburdened by the weight of toxic obligations. We started a small renovation on our kitchen, something we'd talked about for years. I found joy in the simple act of choosing new countertops with my wife, knowing that our hard-earned money was going into our own home, our own future, building equity in a life that was truly ours. The ghost of my family's expectations was finally exorcised. Months turned into a year. The silence from my parents and sister became a normal feature of my life. It's a quiet background hum that I eventually stopped noticing altogether. The absence of their drama was like the absence of a chronic headache. You don't realize how much energy it was taking up until it's finally gone. Our lives blossomed in the space they used to occupy. The kitchen renovation was a success, and we hosted dinner parties for our friends, filling our home with laughter and light. We took that trip to the coast, and then another one a few months later. We were not just living. We were building a life filled with intentional joy, shared respect, and genuine partnership. My relationship with Chloe, already strong, deepened into something even more profound. We were a self-contained unit, a family of 2 that felt more whole than the family of 4 I had grown up in. One Saturday afternoon, Chloe and I were in the nursery, painting the walls a soft, gentle yellow. She was 5 months pregnant, and the reality of becoming a father myself was bringing everything into sharp focus. As I rolled the paint onto the wall, I thought about the kind of father I wanted to be. I would be present, I would be fair, would make sure my child, whether a son or a daughter, would never for a second doubt their value, would never feel like their love and security were conditional. "What are you thinking about?" Chloe asked, pausing with her paintbrush to look at me, a smudge of yellow on her cheek. I smiled, reaching out to gently wipe it away. "I'm thinking about the will," I said, and for the first time, the thought didn't bring a pang of hurt. Not theirs. Ours. We had made an appointment with a lawyer for the following week. The irony was not lost on me. The document that had symbolized my exclusion from my family was now something I was creating to protect my own. Our will would be simple. Everything for each other and everything for our child. A circle of protection with no one left out in the cold. I realized then that I wasn't grieving anymore. The pain of the betrayal had finally scabbed over and healed into a scar, a reminder of a lesson learned. I wasn't grieving the loss of an inheritance. You can't lose something you were never meant to have. I wasn't even grieving the loss of my parents and sister. I was grieving for the boy who spent years trying to earn his place. The young man who thought duty and love were the same thing. I was grieving a fantasy, a relationship that had never actually existed outside of my own hopes. My parents had made their choice. They chose the sparkling, exciting dream of Ava over the quiet, dependable reality of me. They saw me as a utility, and a utility is only noticed when it stops working. In the end, I hadn't just cut them off financially. I had decommissioned myself. I had resigned from the thankless job of being their son. I have no idea what their lives are like now. I assume they are getting by. Perhaps Ava finally found a way to monetize her influencing. Or perhaps my father's health miraculously improved. Enough for him to go back to work. Or maybe they are just scraping by, resentful and bitter. It's strange to admit, but I find that I simply don't care. Their story is no longer my story. My narrative is here, in this house, with my incredible wife and the child we are about to welcome into the world. It's a future I am building with my own hands, for a family that I choose and that chooses me back. I am finally free, and I am finally home. So, what do you think? Am I the bad guy for cutting off my family after they cut me out of their future? I've played it over and over in my head, and while the method was harsh, it felt like the only way to make them understand. Sometimes, the only power you have is to walk away and let the consequences speak for themselves. I chose to invest in my own family and my own peace of mind. And that's a decision I'll stand by. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human, navigating complex relationships and difficult choices. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.